Hi love! Today we are going to be doing lesson 26, session 1, relating fractions to decimals. Here we go. Alright, our first problem says that Max has 248 pennies. How many whole dollars does Max have? What fraction of a dollar is left over? Alright, so what I did here is I organized my information. So I know that I have 248 pennies total, and I also used some previous knowledge. I know that 100 pennies gives me $1. So I wrote that down just that I could keep it in an organized fashion and not trying to keep it all jumbled in my mind. So then what I did is I subtracted it in my way of thinking, an organized way. So I know that I have a total of 248. Then I subtract 100, that gives me $1. I'm left with 148 because 248 minus 100 is 148. I subtract another $1 because I see that I can. I see that 148 is larger than 100, so I can go ahead and subtract another $1. I subtract another $1 and I am left with 48. So then over here, I put my answer in a concise way. So I have $2 and it asks me how much I have left. I'm dealing with hundredths because I'm dealing with pennies. So I have 48 hundredths. Then I just wrote it into a sentence. Max has $2.48. So now it's asking me to look back at my previous problem, what I just did on the other side, and essentially tell them what the dollar and fractions of $1 Max has in a mixed number. We already did that. Remember, a mixed number is a whole and then a fraction, so 2/48 hundredths. All right, now I personally feel like B should come before A, so that's the way that I'm going to explain it to you. So the way that you are writing when we are dealing with hundredths, remember in class I taught a little secret, I taught a little trick. So the number of zeros there are is the number that is behind the decimal. So for example, there are 2 zeros here, right? So then what you would do is you would just essentially put the decimal above the 1 and the rest would be the decimal place. So here we have 2 zeros, we have 2 spots, right? So this would be just like how we see money, which is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with pennies. So this, having a 2 in the ones place, is the same as having that be the whole number in our mixed fraction. Then I would put, right, I would like pretend like there's a 1, a 0, and a 0 right here, because that would be my fraction. So I put my decimal point and then my 48. When you put your decimal point, that is the time that you can say and. So in math, there are certain times. Most people want to say it when we have a comma or etc., but we're technically not supposed to. The only time that you are allowed or permitted to say and is when you have a decimal point. So this would be like, I have $2.48. Now, the place value changes when you deal with decimal points. So the 4 is in the tens place, so it's just like how you normally think that it is. However, we have a decimal point separating it, so you know that there are ones, tens, and hundreds. But if you notice, it's now going in the other direction. So it used to be getting larger when it went to your left, and now it's getting larger when it goes to the right. And then another super tricky thing is the larger it is, it's actually smaller because it's a decimal point. So the more numbers that you have this way to the right of a decimal point are actually quite small. So back up to 2A, it asks you where the 4 is. Well, the 4 is in the tens and the 8 is in the hundreds. We know this because they gave us a diagram down here, okay? So then it asked me to just simply write that out into word form, so I did. I said 2 and 48/100ths because that's how you would say this. Now notice decimal point, I get to say and, so I say and here. I want to go back to that little trick super quickly about the fraction. So we're going to go back to the fraction with the decimal point so that we can do just a little bit of practice. All right, so here's my additional practice. I have 88/100. So what I can do is where this 1 is, I just put a decimal point. Okay, so then that means that 88/100 is the same as 0.88 because I did a decimal point over my 1 and then nothing to carry, I'm doing fine. Okay, now for example, let's do 88/1000. I do a decimal point where my 1 is. Now, there's nothing right here, okay? So I must carry this 0 up. Then I have an 8 and an 8, so it just goes over, like if you were to kind of cross them to have like columns, like how they fit in. So now 88/1000 is really 0.088. Okay, so it's essentially however many zeros there are is the place value behind the decimal, because you're not always going to see them perfectly lined up like this, the way that I did it intentionally. You're sometimes just going to see them kind of centered, and so you're going to need to know, how many place values will I need after the decimal point? Well, there's always a trick. However many zeros there are how many place values behind the decimal point. So here I have 2 zeros, I have decimal point 2 digits. Here I have 3 0, I have decimal point 3 digits. All right, I hope that helped. All right, my love, that was lesson 26, session 1. We will get more practice, but keep up the good work. You're doing great.